A warm welcome to another edition of Diplomatic Channel. I'm Amarachi Ubani. The UK has a new leader. 61-year-old Sir Keir Starmer rose to the top position following Thursday's election, in which the Labour Party swept a total of 412 seats in Parliament, compared to the Conservatives' 121. In other words, Labour gained 211 seats in Parliament, while the Conservatives lost 251. It was a historic win for Labour, ending the Conservatives' 14-year rule and marking the end of Rishi Sunak's 22 months in office as Prime Minister. On Thursday, July 5th, Sunak made his last address as Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. He apologised to the British public following the huge loss suffered at the polls.
I would like to say, first and foremost, I am sorry. I have given this job my all, but you have sent a clear signal that the government of the United Kingdom must change, and yours is the only judgment that matters. I have heard your anger, your disappointment, and I take responsibility for this loss.
Sunak also apologised to his fellow Conservative candidates and campaigners. Then he went on to list what he saw as his key achievements, claiming that Britain is safer, stronger and more secure than it was 20 months ago, and that it is more prosperous, fairer and resilient than it was in 2010.
When I first stood here as your Prime Minister, I told you the most important task I had was to return stability to our economy. Inflation is back to target, mortgage rates are falling, and growth has returned. We have enhanced our standing in the world, rebuilding relations with allies, leading global efforts to support Ukraine, and becoming the home of a new generation of transformative technologies. And our United Kingdom is stronger too, with the Windsor Framework, devolution restored in Northern Ireland, and our union strengthened. I'm proud of those achievements. I believe this country is safer, stronger, and more secure than it was 20 months ago. And it is more prosperous, fairer, and resilient than it was in 2010.
He sent his best regards to the new Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer of the Labour Party.
In this job, his successes will be all our successes, and I wish him and his family well. Whatever our disagreements in this campaign, he is a decent, public-spirited man who I respect.
A few hours later, Keir Starmer made his address as UK Prime Minister. He paid tribute to the work of his predecessor, Rishi Sunak, but said the country has voted decisively for change and national renewal and a return of politics to public service.
You have given us a clear mandate, and we will use it to deliver change, to restore service and respect to politics, end the era of noisy performance, tread more lightly on your lives, and unite our country. 4 nations standing together again, facing down, as we have so often in our past, the challenges of an insecure world, committed to a calm and patient rebuilding. So, with respect and humility, I invite you all to join this government of service.
He also highlighted the challenges ahead.
We've turned a blind eye as millions slid into greater insecurity. Nurses, builders, drivers, carers, people doing the right thing, working harder every day, recognized at moments like this before, yet as soon as the cameras stop rolling, their lives are ignored. I want to say very clearly to those people, not this time. Changing a country is not like flicking a switch. The world is now a more volatile place. This will take a while. But have no doubt that the work of change begins immediately. Have no doubt that we will rebuild Britain with wealth created in every community. Our NHS back on its feet facing the future. Secure borders, safer streets, everyone treated with dignity and respect at work. the opportunity of clean British power, cutting your energy bills for good. And brick by brick, we will rebuild the infrastructure of opportunity.
The work towards a new Britain has apparently begun. Hours after taking power, the new Prime Minister announced much of his new cabinet. Angela Rayner is Deputy Prime Minister. She has been Sir Starmer's deputy since he was elected Labour leader in 2020. Rachel Reeves is Chancellor. Yvette Cooper, Home Secretary. David Lammy, Foreign Secretary. Pat McFadden is Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster. Shabana Mahmood is Justice Secretary. Wes Streeton is Health Secretary. Bridget Phillipson is Education Secretary. Ed Miliband is appointed Energy Secretary. Peter Kyle is Science, Innovation and Technology Secretary. Louise Haig is Transport Secretary. Liz Kendall is Work and Pension Secretary. Jonathan Reynolds is Business Secretary. John Healey is Defense Secretary. Steve Reed is Environment Secretary. Lisa Dandy is Culture, Media and Sport Secretary. Hilary Benn is Northern Ireland Secretary. Ian Murray is Scotland Secretary. Joe Stevens is Wales Secretary. Lucy Powell is Leader of the House of Commons. Darren Jones is Chief Secretary to the Treasury. Alan Campbell is Chief Whip. And Richard Hermer is Attorney General, while Baroness Smith of Basildon is Leader of the House of Lords. So there you have it, Sir Keir Starmer's leading men and women. I want to bring in now the chairman, British Africa Business Alliance, David Smith. He's in London from where he joins us. Thank you for joining us on the program, David.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for inviting me. I'm pleased to be here.
And it's been a hectic week of elections and change of government for the UK. The Conservatives' 14-year hold on power has ended. I guess now you can say the critics were right. The Rishi Sunak did shoot himself in the foot with this election. You think it's a move that he regrets now?
I don't think so. I mean, the options that he had were to go earlier in the year when the economy was not performing as well as it is now. The alternative was to delay until October or November. And as soon as we passed the July point, he would have told all his opponents that he was going for a late election. So I don't think he had an easy choice. 14 years in power for any organization is a tremendous length of time. I think if we hadn't had the pandemic, the election might have changed at an earlier stage. But I think we can say we were expecting a change anyway.
And now you have a Labour government. The last time that this happened was in 1997, when Tony Blair became Prime Minister. He turned out to be Labour Party's longest-serving Prime Minister. Do you think that Starmer could enjoy as much goodwill as he did?
I think the British public reward people who do well, and therefore it will come down to his performance over time. And while we can look back at the Blair years with some experience now, we shouldn't forget that when they left with an empty checkbook. And there was some consternation in the media at the time about the note that the previous chancellor left for the new chancellor. So I think the British public will have its eyes and ears open and will be looking for performance. And if he performs well, and if his government delivers, then he will be rewarded with an extra term.
And in his speech, the first one he made at number 10 Downing Street, he talked about rebuilding Britain, securing the borders, safer streets, affordable homes, security of lives and property is of great concern for people living in any country. So I wonder where Starmer stands on the issue of immigration. And, if that was one of the issues that pushed the needle for Britons on this election, or was it really a matter of social welfare?
I think the real issue is that the hardship that has been endured by the constant cuts in government services, in social services, the difficulty of the whole post-pandemic period, the war in Ukraine, the increasing number of small boats crossing the channel. And when you look at all of those factors, Britain is crying out for a change. I don't know where the change is going to come from, because unless we sell significantly more than we're selling at the moment, we're not going to generate the revenues that are going to afford the services that the country needs to deliver. So I think that the stand on immigration is not one that Sir Keir is going to have to take. It's one that the country has taken. It voted against staying in Europe. It voted for Brexit. And it is very concerned about the pressure the number of migrants crossing into the UK is putting on the economy, especially in those coastal counties. But even where people are distributed further through the UK economy, you find that there are pressures there as well. So the issue on migration is something that needs to be solved. The Rwanda solution hasn't found favour, and I'm not quite sure what you do with migrants who arrive uninvited without the right papers, especially when it would be inhumane to send them back to where they came from. So it's a major problem. It's a major problem.
I remember my conversation with the Rwandan government's spokesperson last week in Kigali, and she said Rwanda has no intentions of sending those who do not make asylum to the UK. Has no intentions of sending them back to their host countries. They can remain in Rwanda, as much as they want. There are, processes in place to make this happen. So it will be interesting to see how, that turns out. But the UK Parliament is still divided about whether or not that deal goes through, because a lot of money has already been transferred to Rwanda, but no immigrants have left yet from the UK, and they haven't started the processes of, trying to decipher those who are genuine asylum seekers and those who have no reason to be in the UK.
It'll be very interesting to see how the Labour government deals with this. As someone who has visited Rwanda on many occasions, if I was offered an opportunity to go and live there, I would choose to do so. It looks and it seems to be a very, very positive and very comfortable environment. I appreciate there are many views on how it's actually got to be where it is. But I wouldn't have said it was a hardship posting in terms of some of the other places that could have been on the list. I think that when it comes down to it, the UK is a relatively small island. It already has about 80 million people here. It's about 1/3 of the size of Nigeria. There isn't space for an awful lot more people. And I think that the UK population is not ready to welcome more people in the same way that both France and Germany are suffering from the influx. And I think it's going to be a real issue for the government to work out what it can do legally and what is practical.
Let's go back to the elections now in the UK. And now there is a Labour government, in position. But the votes, were they against the Conservatives or were they vote for Labour?
It was very definitely against the Conservatives. I think the split of the Conservative vote between Reform and Conservatives was one element. But I think when you look at the pressure that's been put on the economy and how that has impacted on the lives of ordinary people, the ordinary people are asking for a change. I've been quite impressed by some of the things that have been said by the Labour Party as they assume power. And if they can deliver the sorts of things that they're talking about, they should do well. When I look at it from an African perspective, I think to have David Lammy in place as Foreign Secretary is a really important step forward. I'm interested to learn more about the new Minister for Africa. But when I was talking earlier about the importance of making new sales, I think the UK and Nigeria have to settle their differences and get the economic engagement going again. The number of projects being held back by the lack of UK finance, the strength of the Nigerian diaspora here, they are all important things, both for Nigeria and for the UK. So I'm slightly concerned that with regard to foreign policy, the Labour government is going to be more conservative than the Conservatives were. But I think we have to get the communication going so that business can play an important part in the whole development argument and the need to generate business and wealth in places like Africa and its brothers and sisters around, like Nigeria and its brothers and sisters around the continent.
But you know, David, government is a continuum. So even though the Conservatives are no longer in office and Labour is now in government, it doesn't appear that, you know, Britain's posture towards Nigeria will change under Labour.
I think that's what I'm holding my breath to hear about. I would really like to see a much more positive engagement between the two countries. I think it would be good for both of them. But you're right, the policies are written and the policies are maintained. And it will be interesting to see how the different personalities bring their characters to bear on the issues that are in discussion.
It would also be interesting to see, you know, what Starmer intends, you know, for the continent. He spoke to the South African president, Cyril Ramaphosa, earlier today, and he said, I mean, they talked about the future G20 conference that will be coming up, I think, later in the year, and then said that he hopes, you know, relations between both countries continue. Is it interesting that it is South Africa that he reached out to and not Africa's largest economy, which will be Nigeria?
I think this is part of the issue that I was alluding to earlier. I think Nigeria has a role to play as a state's country for the continent. It has a significant leadership role to play, and I'd like to see Nigeria assuming that role. I think from the question of South Africa, there are lots of issues in South Africa at the moment that it needs to resolve. It also has a relatively new government. So I would think that in the balance of things, South Africa has historically been the leading economy. And maybe the Labour government, Sir Keir Starmer and his advisors, have taken a step in that direction.
What do Britons expect from Sir Keir Starmer?
What I'm looking for is consistency in government, policies that are delivered. I'd like to see a step away from the partisan political banter that goes on between the two parties as they address some of the most difficult economic questions since the Second World War. When you look at the economy and where it is in the UK at the moment, there hasn't been an intervention as significant as COVID since the Second World War. And I don't think many people are actually considering how much was taken out of our economy by the amount of time that the economy was in lockdown. As we consider that and we move forward, we need to build new foundations, and those new foundations need to be robust enough for us to be able to manage greater exports, greater production, and greater engagement on the issues, the social issues that have come forward since the pandemic, much, much more strongly. One of the big questions here is whether people will go back to working full-time in offices. And I think that there is going to be a major discussion around that, because if you don't know who your office colleagues are, your team doesn't work so well, your engagement will not be quite so quick, your profitability may well suffer, and therefore the opportunity for the businesses here to generate the GDP that we enjoy and to increase that at a significant rate is going to be tested.
Indeed, we shall. Now, in his last address, as Prime Minister Rishi Sunak apologized to the British people, he said he'd heard their anger. He'd also heard their disappointment. He takes responsibility for the loss of the polls. What were his mistakes in government?
I think the biggest difficulty was actually holding his team together. If you look at the fragmentation that went on within the Conservative Party between the departments, the Conservative election process divided the party and then divided again. And so you ended up with a third set of divisions by the time Rishi came into play, most recently through Gaza. There is a tremendous opportunity for failure, whoever is in power. And I think the mistakes were being unable to mobilize the sorts of dynamic activities that could impact on the economy and show benefit through to the people. Everything was held at a government level. I think that would have been one of the biggest things, the biggest difficulties that he would have had to deal with.
Well, as we're drawing closer to the end of this interview, Sir Starmer did announce a new cabinet as early as Saturday, as I mentioned earlier. He's also beginning his UK nation tour. Is that a sign of things to come? How fast this government intends to move? How fast he intends a change to happen in Britain?
I don't think we were surprised by how quickly the cabinet was put in place. It's typical for that cabinet to be announced within 24 hours of the election. And so I don't see that as a change from what has gone before. I think that his need to get out and see people is part of the franchise that he needs to build with those people who have not voted for the Labour Party. And therefore, he needs to be seen and he needs to be carrying forward the projects. And again, listening to David Lammy talking about the Foreign Office and the Foreign Secretary's role and the attitude that he's bringing for engagement, I'm very encouraged by what I've heard. Again, the proof of the pudding will be in the eating and how the whole process is maintained. I'm very concerned about how the UK economy grows beyond the low levels of growth that it's achieved so far. It needs to grow significantly faster.
Some really important policy decisions there for the new British Prime Minister, Keir Starmer. Thank you again, David, for speaking with me on Diplomatic Channel.
I'm I'm very grateful for the opportunity. Thank you.
This is where we end the program this week. I'm glad you could join us. If you have questions or comments regarding today's topic, you can send them using any of the addresses showing on your screen. I'm Amarachi Ubani. I'll see you next time.